Before I start this talk, I want to lay out, this is the first week of what in our tradition we call Kilch. Kilch means tight Dharma, or sometimes you can think of it as tight practice. So it's essentially the time of year that those of us who practice here at the Zen Center look at our practice, look at our meditation, our chanting, how we're bringing what we do here at the Zen Center into our everyday lives. And in a sense, we intensify our efforts. In our head temple in Rhode Island, they're doing a 90-day meditation retreat, which is actually just as it sounds. The schedule goes from about 4:30 in the morning till about 9:30 at night. There's about 13 periods of meditation. There's walking meditation, there's work, there's chanting, there's eating, and then there are interspersed hours of rest. And people do that for 90 days. One of our Sangha members named Root is actually at the retreat, sitting the full 90 days. At least that's the plan. We'll see what happens. Most people make it, some don't. And either way is okay. It's the effort that counts. And so we have our annual 8-day meditation retreat during this time. Often we have a 3-day meditation retreat in January, although this year we're only having a 1-day. And also as part of this Kilch time, we ask our Dharma teachers and Dharma teachers in training, that's basically anybody who's got a long robe as a Dharma teacher, and Dharma teachers in training are people who are preparing to be Dharma teachers. And we ask them to give a Dharma talk on a section of this book called The Compass of Zen. The Compass of Zen is a book that's written by Zen Master Bon Soeng. It's actually a series of... Zen Master Bon Soeng, first of all, is the founding teacher of our Zen Center and our school. Our school is an international school. We probably have close to 100 Zen centers around the world. And he traveled from Korea to the United States. After he was here for a while, he traveled to Eastern and Western Europe. And sometime after that, started creating Zen centers also in Asia. So I'd say we have close to 100 around the world. And Zen Master Bon Soeng put this Compass of Zen together. When I first came to Empty Gate in 1979, this Compass of Zen was a very thin pamphlet or booklet. And basically what this book is all of those little sections flushed out with Zen Master Bon Soeng's Dharma talks and their transcriptions from there. So each week for the next 3 months, we'll have a talk from some section in this book. The way the timing of my monthly talk goes, I generally lead off this series, so if I ask other people to give a talk from this book, I thought, well, I should be doing that myself too. So tonight, I picked the beginning section of the Zen Buddhism section of this book. This book is set up, there's an introduction, preface, all of that stuff. And then it goes through Theravadan Buddhism, which is, you might say, the first turning of Buddhism. It's the Buddhism closest to what the Buddha actually said, and practices that, and teachings that you can say come most directly, perhaps, from then. The second section is called Mahayana Buddhism. Mahayana Buddhism is, it's hard to explain this very simply. As Buddhism went on in India, probably about 1,000 years, in the later years that Buddhism was in India, it changed a little bit, became a little bit less about my personal experience and more about universal experience. So a phrase that I like in Mahayana Buddhism is, well, without getting to the phrase, it's something like, I will put off my own enlightenment, you could say, and wait for everybody, and then simultaneously we'll get it. So in the Mahayana tradition, you're less concerned about getting out of here, which in early Buddhism, if you got enlightenment, you would be finished with your rebirths, and you'd be done, gone, whatever that means. In Mahayana Buddhism, you put that off to come back and help other people. So it moved from, this is about me and my practice, to this is about us and our practice. So in a sense, compassion became an important element in Buddhism. Now, of course, Theravada Buddhism, Buddhists would say that compassion is there too. I want to be careful not to denigrate one or the other. It's just what style. Usually it's about whatever country that Buddhism goes to, what style your country has. The thing about the United States is all different kinds of Buddhism came here. So you'll find all different kind of practices available. So the third kind of Buddhism is called Zen Buddhism. That's what we practice here. And Zen Buddhism really grew out of the Mahayana tradition. In a sense, you could simply say that when Buddhism traveled from India to China, it took on some of the flavor of Chinese culture and Chinese metaphysical understanding of the universe, particularly Taoism. So Taoism and Mahayana Buddhism come together, and out of that is born Zen Buddhism. And just to acknowledge that Tibetan Buddhism is not part of this collection. Tibetan Buddhism is another particular type of Buddhism, and we don't talk about it that much from this book. Saying that, Paul said that I'm a psychotherapist in my other job, and that I heard one time years ago that there was a study, and the study was when somebody is studying to be a psychotherapist, you learn a particular form of psychotherapy. Some learn psychodynamics, some learn cognitive therapy, and there's all different kinds. And generally where you train in one particular thing. So they checked in with people about 9 years out from their training, and what they found is it becomes a mishmash. People start grabbing from all different theories, and that in many ways, people are, even though you have different training, in many ways you're practicing the same thing. And I'd have to say I think that's somewhat true with Buddhism too. That theoretically there are all these differences, but in actuality, Buddhism is about what am I? What am I actually, not what do I think I am? And so Zen Master Bon Soeng would say, attaining my true self and helping this world. So regardless of the kind of Buddhism, at this point in time, practice is about answering the question, what am I? And using that to help this world. So that underlines pretty much anything that we're going to talk about, and certainly what I'm going to talk about tonight. So I'm going to start off, and I'm just going to read this first page from what Zen Master Bon Soeng wrote about Zen Buddhism, and it's not quite a poem, but it might sound like one. 1. To pass through this gate, do not attach to any thinking that arises in the mind. 2. Not depending on words, a special transmission outside the sutras. Pointing directly to mind, see your true nature, become Buddha. 3. The Buddha taught all dharmas in order to save all minds. When you do not keep all When you do not keep all these minds, what use is there for the Dharma? So, as strange as it might sound, these three questions underpin Zen practice. So, I'm going to read a little bit from this just to give you a little context. So this is from Zen Master Bon Soeng's speech. Zen means understanding my true self. What am I? Everyone says, I am. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. We always say I, but what is this I? Where does this I come from? When you die, where does it go? These are the most important questions you can ever ask. So, it's interesting when I read this, because I remember a time when I was 15 years old. I was at you could say call it a party. It was a large party. It was an organization that was having a party. And I remember walking around saying to somebody or some people, I just want to know who I am. Now, in some regards, most teenagers go through that. And I was right smack in the middle of it. You're in this place in your life where everything is changing. I know for myself, it was a big transition period. Around 13, 14, 15 years old, I was separating from my parents and my family. It was 1968, so there was a lot going on when I was 15 years old, and I got sucked up into all of that. And I say that in the most positive way I could. It was an amazing time. I think a lot of teenagers let that question go and find that their adult life calls. You have to choose something, you have to be an adult, you have to fit into society, you have to just put those questions of childhood away and suck it up in a sense and do what you have to do. Do what you're supposed to do. At that time, many young men were being drafted into the army to fight a war that many of them didn't believe in. And there was a lot of tension around that. And perhaps that's why this stuck with me so strongly, because I wasn't willing to conform, to become something that I couldn't embrace on my own. So where many of my friends and people I knew kind of put those questions aside, I couldn't let them go. And in a sense, I made a vow to myself that I was going to find out. I was going to at least tackle the question. So, of course, I didn't read what I just read to you till many, many years later, but when I read something like this, it explains something to me of why I stayed with Zen practice so long. Because for me, these questions of what am I, what is this, where does I come from, what is this I? It has been the driving force in my life. And I think one way or another, it's true for many of us. Some make it our primary focus, others put it aside. But as a psychotherapist, I can see people who would never come to a Zen center or don't tackle this question of what am I directly, underneath, many of the problems that I think we face as human beings come from grappling with this question, or maybe more importantly, ignoring the question. So, when we ignore the question, what am I? I'm making this a kind of a sweeping statement, but when we ignore the question, we fall into following the culture, the expectations that are put on us, and those things actually push us in our lives. But there's often a dissatisfaction, there's a gap between who we really are and what we do. And that gap creates a lot of suffering for us. And like I say, people that I work with who never walk into a Zen center, I see them struggling with this inauthenticity. I think that's a good word for it in the way I see it. That if you don't grapple with this question, what am I? It's very likely, and even when we do grapple with it, the same thing happens. This kind of inauthentic life starts to grow. And somewhere inside, we know it. And like I said, that gap between our true nature and the life that we live creates incredible suffering, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. When I was a teenager, I was very aware watching, not so much in my family, although there was a bit of it, but more in the family of my friends and people I knew, that there was so much pain acted out on within families. There was so much potential for frustration, anger. What I would now say is the acting out of that gap. That people suffer so much, and we inflict that suffering on people that we have the power to inflict it on. And it became very important for me to search out this question, what am I? It's interesting, it's one of the things that Zen Master Bon Soeng says here is, in terms of these most important questions, he says, when you die, where do you go? I've said this before in Dharma Talks, and probably differently than many of us in this room, that question doesn't engage me very much. I'm not too concerned about where I go when I die. I'm much more concerned with how is it that I live in this moment. Death is quite important, because death, the recognition of death intensifies this moment that we're in. So where I'm not so concerned what happens after I die, the fact that I will die gives life to this moment. And it pushes me to remember. Because, just like everybody, I can get tired of things, I can get grumpy. I can think, oh gosh, I gotta do that again. But there's something that goes off in my mind when those kind of feelings arise, that I remember essentially, death is just around the corner. And you don't know when it's going to happen. So wake up. Just now. Hear these sounds. Smell these smells. We get so, I want to use the word inert. Does that make sense? We get so, in a sense, closed down. We get so used to things that we don't even see the miraculous, and I use that word quite loosely, but we miss the beauty and the wonder that's around us. So in a lot of ways, to me, Zen practice is about waking up to what's actually happening in this moment. So, again, 1, to pass through this gate, do not attach to any thinking that arises in the mind. Sometimes I say that our school could be called the don't know school of Zen. Not knowing is the essence of our practice. And that's very counterintuitive, because all our life we're taught we're supposed to know, and actually we impress each other with what we know. But remember this question, what am I? If you really take that question in, my hunch is you probably don't know, really. Especially if you're asked, where did you come from and where do you go when you die? There's lots and lots of theories. There's lots and lots of ideas about it, but nobody really knows. But we create these ideas in some ways to protect ourselves from these difficult questions. But if you don't hold on to any idea, if you admit you don't know, then you have to look. Then you have to wonder. Then you have to open up to what's happening. Sometimes we say, when we think we know, our mind closes off. We fall asleep. But when we don't know, our senses are heightened. Our awareness of the moment becomes alive. So sometimes it seems to me, when I'm walking around the street and I'm just looking at people, sometimes it can feel like we're like ghosts. That we're there, but we're really not there. I imagine most of us know that experience of being there, but really not there. It's like sounds are happening, things are going on, and we miss it because we're drifting off into some idea. So Zen Master Bon Soeng says, and I'm sure he took this from traditional Buddhist teaching, to pass through this gate, do not attach to any thinking that arises in the mind. Because what Zen Buddhism is most interested in is what we call before thinking mind. What am I before thinking? Sometimes I look at this as the difference between the actual experience and the commentary that we spin in our thinking mind. So imagine you're walking down the street and you hear a sound, or you see a flower. Any experience that happens. In a moment, boom, there's the experience. For most of us, we can't even notice where the experience stops and our commentary about that experience begins. But generally speaking, it seems to me that we get so lost in the commentary of it. Oh, that's such a beautiful flower. Boy, I wish I had more flowers like that. I should plant some of those flowers in my garden. Oh gosh, my garden, it looks so bad. The neighbor looked at it the other day, and I don't know what he was thinking, but he looked at me funny. It's like, God, everybody on the street hates me now because my garden is so bad. And one thought goes to the next, and we're a million miles from the flower that we've just seen that set off that chain of thinking. We get so lost and confused by these thoughts that we get lost and we can't experience what's actually happening. So in Zen practice, we're trying to return to the actual experience. So when we say before thinking, we're talking about just that experience. So many of you have come often, you know we go through this all the time. Here's the stick, and here's this floor. When they meet, I would guess every one of us in this room can hear this sound. But now watch what you think about that sound. What are you doing with that sound? So, Paul gave us meditation instruction tonight, and Zen, the word Zen literally translates meditation. So Zen is meditation Buddhism. Zen Buddhism is meditation Buddhism. Meditation is the heart of Zen practice. When we do formal meditation, we sit on our mats, just as Paul explained. We hold a particular posture, we do a particular breathing, and we watch. And what we're really watching is, number one, the experience of this moment, and number two, really what we end up watching are the thoughts and feelings that we create around the experience. So, as simple as it is to say, return to before thinking mind, it goes against all of our training, starting probably from the day we're born. But certainly when our conscious mind begins to form, everything pushes us towards the thought and the feeling rather than the experience. So we do formal practice, like I said with that 90-day retreat, all day long for 90 days. Why? So we can experience the experience and work with that process of getting lost in our thinking. So before thinking mind, the thing as it is, not what I think and feel about that. So as we're trying to untangle this question, what am I? It actually, just to give you a hint, you don't need to try to come up with a nice fancy sentence that says, I am this. Because as soon as I say, I am this, I'm leaving out that. Because I am not only this. In fact, from the Buddhist perspective, my true self, this whole universe, my original substance, the substance of the whole universe is the same substance. So one way I like to, that resonates for me, that I like to talk about it, is remember your high school chemistry class and you learn about the periodic table? And the periodic table is a list of all the known elements, and some of them that human beings have created themselves. And when you study the periodic table, what you find is it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I think 1 is helium, I think 8 is oxygen. A helium atom has 1 electron. I guess one proton and 1 neutron. An oxygen atom has 8 of them. So the difference between helium and oxygen is the number of these things, but they're all made up of the same thing. So modern science now breaks it down more and more. So we used to know about quarks, whatever they may be, but we're told that they're the building blocks of these protons, neutrons, and electrons. Now they seem to find this particle that holds everything all together. But everything in this universe, scientifically, not metaphysically, is made up of the same substance. It's only a matter of how many that differentiates it. So, before thinking, something can be experienced. After thinking, it's all a story. So when he says, do not attach to thinking, it's actually a beautiful way of saying it, because it's not that we have to stop thinking. It's just that what happens is we get grabbed by our thinking. You ever notice that experience of walking down the street and you remember something that you were supposed to do that you didn't do? My experience is sometimes when that happens, there's kind of a gasp inside, and things tighten up. And the moment before I remembered, everything was one way. After I remembered, it's all changed. In actuality, nothing's changed. But my entire experience has changed because of this one thought. It's not bad or good. Human beings think, but the attachment to the thinking sucks us in and we lose something quite important about ourselves. 2, not depending on words, a special transmission outside the sutras. Pointing directly to mind, see your true nature, become Buddha. Before thinking, everything you experience is true. After thinking, we make a lot of differentiations. We make a lot of ideas. Before thinking, it just is. I'm on Facebook as Zen Master Bon Soeng, and I don't know how this happened, but I have this Facebook friend, I don't know where he's from, but I notice on his Facebook page there's a lot of Arabic writing. But the picture he uses for his profile is that of Zen Master Bon Soeng. So I can only imagine. I don't know. But he wrote me. He wrote me this week, I think, or last week. And now I'm going to get into this dialogue right in the middle. But he said, you and Zen Master Bon Soeng talk a lot about don't know. And to take it one step further, it's being careful about not believing something just because it's told to you. That's part of not knowing. It's to be curious, but not locked into some idea. He said, but don't we have to believe in reincarnation? And I think it was karma. It might have been something else. So how do you square don't know with these teachings of reincarnation? And I wrote him back, and I said, the truth is, you really don't know. Isn't that so? And he wrote me back and he said, but if I don't know, and if I don't believe in reincarnation, why should I find my true self? So I wrote him back once more, and this is where karma comes in, but I talked about what don't know helps us with is clarity. Because as I said before, this is a little commentary, I didn't write all this. We get lost in our thoughts and our feelings, we get attached to things, and we lose contact with our nature, and we also lose clarity. Our actions become to get something. We become very self-centered and very desirous. So I said, looking for true self helps us become clear. And reincarnation, you can talk about reincarnation, about life after you die, but actually, reincarnation is this very moment. Right now, we're reborn. And if we're not clear, the life we create is an unclear life. So if I'm just looking out for myself and grabbing what I can get, then when I act, that inflicts all sorts of pain and difficulties on somebody else, because it's got to come from somewhere, and if I want it, then I'm going to take it from you one way or another. Usually we don't just steal it, but think about it. How much we take from others so that we can be satisfied. But by being clear, we can see our actions, and we have a choice. So that perhaps when we act in this moment, our choice is more clear and maybe more wise and compassionate. So in the next moment, that's the world that's reborn. If I steal something from you, or if let's just say it that way, then the next moment that's born, you're angry because I took something from you. If in this moment I give you something, in the next moment you're appreciative. And that's the world that's born. So this not knowing mind, this before thinking, this working with clarity, actually leads to peace and harmony in the world. You know, I'm not the only one to say this, but world peace doesn't come from somewhere out there. It comes from our own actions. How we live in this world is the world that gets created. What we do really matters. And that's what Zen's about. Being alive, awake, and clear enough in this moment so that we know and we can act in a way that that doesn't destroy the world, but actually gives life to the world. So, as I said earlier, we practice to attain our true self, or maybe you can say, to live this before thinking life. And then to act in a way that brings life to the world rather than death. So I really didn't get through the whole section, as often happens. So let me just say, I want to leave a little time for questions, but the Buddha taught all dharmas in order to save all minds. When you do not keep all these minds, what use is there for the Dharma? Dharma is truth. Dharma is the teachings of the Buddha. All the teachings in the world, they're very helpful. But you've got to do it for yourself. In the book here, Zen Master Bon Soeng compares it. He says, if you show a hungry person the picture of a banana, they may indeed know what a banana is, theoretically, but it won't take away their hunger. If you want to know what a banana is, peel it and eat it. And then you know. And all the theory in the world won't give you that wisdom that taking one bite of a banana will. You can learn its chemical structure. You can be the artist that paints the banana. There's all these things you can do with a banana, but if you want nourishment, you've got to eat it. And that's the heart of Zen. We use the teachings of Zen to help us wake up, but we recognize that the actual work is our own. So that's why we spend so much time in either formal meditation, or maybe you could call it informal meditation, which is living your life, working with clarity, working with this before thinking mind. So there's formal meditation, formal practice. I said at the beginning of chanting tonight, chanting is the same as meditation, it's just a different form. We practice walking meditation. When we're going from one place to another, we practice driving meditation. Always and everywhere, return to this question, what am I and don't know? That's the heart of Zen practice. And that's what we do in this building. That's what our whole program is about. It's helping ourselves and each one of us attain this before thinking mind and use that in every situation that we're in to help this world. Question? Comment? Anything anybody wants me to talk about?
When you talked about clarity and karma, I thought about when I first studied Buddhism and learned about the precepts. The teacher was talking about, I vow not to take what is not given. And she said, my material needs are met.
I'm sorry, say that again.
My material needs are met.
My
I don't need
material
to
needs.
shoplift
Yes.
or, so it's often interpreted as not stealing, but it's literally not taking what is not given. She said, in the evening, when my husband's reading, and I interrupt, and I want his attention, I'm taking what he is not given. And the precept is a reminder that brings back the clarity.
Mm-hmm.
And breaking the precept by actually taking his attention when he wants to read, karmically changes the whole dynamic. It's just, what you were saying really moved me, and I just thought of that one example of...
It's interesting, as with all teachings, that's a beautiful example of it. But if you go home tonight and you need something from your partner, you might need to interrupt them. So the precepts are wonderful guideposts to stop for a second. Do I need to do this? To just give one more moment. And then ask, and then accept. what's given. The way, in a similar vein, the first precept is not to kill. Well, most of us don't walk around killing other people. We kill bugs, and those of us who eat meat might be killing animals. If you don't eat meat, you're still killing lettuce, carrots. In a way, all of these precepts, it's pretty impossible not to break them. But another way of looking at that precept is not to kill the moment. How many times you walk into a room and people are occupied, or your husband is reading, and because of your self-centered needs, you grab the energy. In a room sometimes you can make a big statement about something and it falls flat. And all the life is sucked out of the moment. So again, how do you bring yourself into the situation that enhances rather than kills? Any other question, comment? Some of you are new here. Anything, even not so much what I talked about, but anything that would help you understand more what happens here? Or any questions about what we do? Because I'm talking about the heart of the matter, but those of you here for the first time, you see we're wearing these funny robes. We do things in a particular way. So Zen is, in a sense, contradictory, because we create form in order to recognize the insubstantiality of form. So form becomes like a mindfulness exercise to keep awake, not to be attached to who does it better than somebody else. But the mind can trip out in all sorts of ways on anything. That's why we talk about before thinking mind. Yes, sir.
My question is, so I meditate on my own, but when I do meditate on my own, I have to keep my eyes closed. And when I started meditation here, I realized my eyes are closed, and it's like, oh, you strictly said that you said, keep your eyes open, look down 45 degrees. So just wondering what's the difference and why you prefer to open.
What's the difference for you? That's the difference.
Okay.
I have a bit of I have my own view of this is it can't really be that one is right and one is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Because all different groups form their own way of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's interesting for me is that in these later years, my eyes start to drift close. What I notice when my eyes drift close, I'm more likely to be dreamy. So remembering to open my eyes a bit helps me stay more present and focused.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like what's right and what's wrong, but Zen is not about going off into a dream. It's about waking up. And one of the beautiful things about meditating with your eyes open is that it's practice for being able to take your meditation off of the cushion into your life. Mm-hmm. When you do walking meditation, it's very difficult to do that with your eyes closed. If you're the only one in this room, you might be able to get away with 10 minutes of it, but who knows where you'll end up. And these corners are very sharp. So there's something very practical about finding a way to do your practice with your eyes open. But it's not like good or bad, it's just a style. And each one of us who do this for a long time have to grapple with it in their own way. One thing that strikes me is that Paul gives meditation instruction every Wednesday night. And then he hits the chukpi, and then you're on your own. Nobody's checking you. Nobody's really making sure. So I think what really happens is that each one of us struggle a little bit to find our own way. And my wife happens to practice a different kind of Buddhism. She practices Vipassana Buddhism. In Vipassana practice, they give you a lot of instruction. They almost lead you through things to get you to a certain place. Zen style is a little bit more like throwing you in the pool and you flail around a while until you find a way to swim. And then once you get your bearings in the water, then we can talk about technique, we can help you be a more efficient swimmer, but you find your own way. And I think that's a little more Zen style. Honestly, I think it's just style, though. It's not like it's better or worse. For me, the thing, I said it before, the attraction to this question, what am I? And Zen is about immediacy. Zen is about really being present and alive right in the midst of what's happening. And personally, for me, that's quite appealing. Any last question before we end? Yes, sir.
Along the lines of getting comfortable in the water and then trying new things, I remember a couple weeks ago you talked about how you've been meditating for so long in your life at this point it's kind of unclear what it does for you exactly. It's just such woven in. And as I've started to sit more, I've noticed that less and less I can tell what's happening.
I mean, how it's impacting
Yes,
your life.
yes. And at the same time, like recently my life has become, there's been a lot of really good things, but also a lot more chaos internally. And I noticed that even if I'm sitting the same amount, I can plunge into like intense emotional agony, like that, which didn't used to happen. And I'm having some strange physical sensations times when I'm sitting where it feels like my chest is like being crushed by a vice, or I feel like I'm choking or somebody's strangling me. I don't really know what to do with that. I mean, I feel like I know what you're going to say, but...
Help me out here.
Be curious about it, continue to pay attention, open up to it.
And work with it.
Mm-hmm.
Work with it.
Mm.
I mean, maybe in private interview, you and I could get into it a little bit specifically and try to look into what's going on. But generally, whatever our experience is, that's what we have to deal with. And it's my sense in a way that you've been practicing long enough that you're opening up to things that have been there all along, but you weren't aware of, or you had a way to avoid. And now it's right here. So I don't know what that is. I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. So yes, be curious. Yeah, I mean, if it becomes too much, stand up. But work with it. That's how we grow. That's where wisdom arises. I used the word enlightenment before. In the Tibetan tradition, I think enlightenment is depicted as a two-headed dragon. Wisdom and compassion. The wisdom piece is, I've been talking about compassion, but wisdom is quite important. Wisdom, in a Buddhist sense, isn't about what you learn in a book. It's about what you learn from working with your life. Really discovering, what am I? And be careful again, what am I is not I am this. What am I is always changing. This moment is always changing. But we always ask, what is it that never changes? That absolute, that original substance. But it takes all sorts of forms. It may be helium, it may be oxygen. Helium has its function, oxygen has its function. Use it. Don't reject anything.